Tonight, I'm bringing you 5 true horror stories from the darkest corners of Canada. Stories that happen to real people. Stories that will make you question what lurks in the northern darkness. These aren't just campfire tales. These are accounts from people who survived something they still can't fully explain. If these stories gave you chills, please like and subscribe to my channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I've been driving trucks for 17 years, mostly long-haul routes through northern Ontario, sometimes up into the territories when the pay is right. I've seen my share of weird things out there on those empty highways, strange lights, animals that don't move right, weather that comes out of nowhere. But nothing prepared me for what happened on Highway 599 in February of 2023. It was my third run of the month up to Pickle Lake, the kind of route most drivers avoid in winter. 400 kilometers of nothing but black spruce, frozen lakes, and roads so remote you might not see another vehicle for hours. The temperature that night was sitting at -38 Celsius, cold enough that your breath freezes before it leaves your mouth, cold enough that if your truck breaks down, you've got maybe an hour before hypothermia sets in. I left Thunder Bay around 6 p.m., which meant I'd be driving through the night. I prefer it that way, actually. Less traffic, and the northern lights sometimes put on a show that makes the loneliness worth it. My rig was loaded with construction supplies. Nothing special, just another job. I had my thermos of coffee, a thriller audiobook downloaded, and a full tank of diesel. Everything was routine. The first 3 hours were uneventful. I passed through Savant Lake around 9, grabbed a quick bite at the truck stop, and continued north. The highway narrowed after that, becoming a thin ribbon of plowed asphalt cutting through an ocean of snow and trees. My headlights were the only light for miles in every direction. Around midnight, I saw him. He was standing on the shoulder of the road, right at the edge of my high beams. A man in a dark winter coat, one arm raised, not frantically waving, just raised. Standing perfectly still in -40 weather, like he was waiting for a bus in downtown Toronto. My first instinct was to keep driving. You don't stop for hitchhikers up here, especially at night. Too many stories of robberies, of people who weren't right in the head wandering these remote highways. But something made me slow down. Maybe it was the fact that stopping here, in this cold, was a death sentence. Maybe it was because I'd want someone to stop for me. I pulled the rig to a stop about 20 meters past him, watching my mirrors. He walked toward the truck with steady, unhurried steps. No shivering, no hunched shoulders against the cold, just walking like it was a spring afternoon. I cracked my window an inch. "You okay, buddy?" He stopped at the bottom of my door. In the red glow of my running lights, I could see he was maybe in his 40s, clean-shaven, with dark hair. His coat looked thin, not nearly warm enough for this weather, but his face wasn't red from cold. His breath wasn't fogging. "Heading north?" he asked. His voice was flat, almost monotone. "Pickle Lake," I said, already regretting this stop. "Where are you trying to get to?" "North is fine." He looked up at me, and I noticed his eyes didn't reflect the light the way they should have. "Can I ride with you?" Every instinct told me to say no, but leaving someone out here was murder, plain and simple. I unlocked the passenger door. "Get in. Warm up." He climbed into the cab without a word, moving with an odd, stiff precision. I cranked up the heat and got the truck moving again, trying to shake off the unease settling into my gut. "You got a name?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. "Thomas," he said after a long pause. "Thank you for stopping." "No problem." "What were you doing out there? Your car breakdown?" "Something like that." I waited for him to elaborate, but he just sat there, staring straight ahead through the windshield. His hands were folded in his lap, pale and unnaturally still. I noticed he wasn't wearing gloves. His fingers should have been purple with frostbite, but they looked perfectly normal. We drove in silence for about 20 minutes. The cab should have been warming up, but I felt cold despite the heater blasting. I turned it up higher. "You're not cold?" I finally asked, nodding toward his thin coat. Thomas turned his head to look at me, the movement slow and deliberate, like a camera panning. "No, are you?" "Yeah, actually. Heater's acting up, I think." I tapped the gauge. It was set to maximum. He smiled then. It wasn't a natural smile. his lips pulled back too far, showing too many teeth. "It's going to get much colder." The way he said it made my skin crawl. I focused on the road, hands tight on the wheel. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, trees pressing in on both sides like walls. No turnoffs, no rest stops, nowhere to pull over that wouldn't put us in a snowbank. "So, Thomas, where exactly are you heading?" I tried to keep my voice casual. "Got family up north?" "I'm going back," he said. "I've been gone a long time. Too long. Back home? Back to where I belong." The heater was still blasting, but I could see my breath now. Thin wisps of condensation forming in the air. That wasn't right. That wasn't possible. I glanced at Thomas. He was staring at me with those dark, reflectionless eyes. "Your breath," he said, tilting his head. "It's freezing, just like mine should be." I looked back at the road, my heart starting to hammer. We were coming up on a bridge over the Flint River. I knew this route well enough to know there was nothing but wilderness for another 60 kilometers. "Listen, Thomas, do you know what happens when you freeze to death?" He interrupted. His voice hadn't changed in pitch or tone since he got in the truck. It was the same flat monotone. "First, your body starts shivering. That's it, trying to generate heat. Then the shivering stops. That's when you know you're dying. Your core temperature drops, your organs start shutting down. But the interesting part is what happens to your mind." I didn't want to ask, but the words came out anyway. "What happens? You start to feel warm, peaceful. Some people even start taking off their clothes because they're convinced they're overheating. It's called paradoxical undressing. They find bodies in the snow, half naked, with peaceful expressions on their faces, like they just decided to lie down and sleep." My hands were shaking on the wheel. The temperature gauge on my dashboard was dropping. 70 degrees, 60, 50. "I didn't feel peaceful," Thomas continued. "I felt angry, confused. I kept walking, thinking I'd find help, but the road was empty. Just like tonight, nobody stopped. Not for hours. I slammed on the brakes. The truck shuddered to a stop in the middle of the highway. "Get out." Thomas didn't move. He turned that horrible mechanical smile on me again. "I can't. I've been waiting out here for 3 years, Mark. 3 years on this road, trying to get home. Everyone who stops, they help me get a little further. But I need to get all the way home. How do you know my name?" My voice was barely a whisper. I'd never told him. He pointed at something on the dashboard. My truck registration, visible through the plastic holder. Mark Davidson. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. It was what I saw in the side mirror. The road behind us wasn't empty anymore. There were figures standing there, maybe a dozen of them, spaced out along the highway at regular intervals. All of them dressed in inadequate winter clothes. All of them perfectly still. All of them just outside the reach of my taillights. "They're waiting too," Thomas said, following my gaze. "All of us, stuck on the roads where we died, trying to find our way home. You stopping for me, that was kind. But now you're part of the pattern." The cab was freezing now. Frost was forming on the inside of the windshield. My teeth were chattering so hard I could barely speak. What do you want?" "Just to go home, to Pickle Lake. That's where I was heading when my truck went through the ice. If you take me there, you get to leave. If you don't," he gestured to the figures behind us, "you become like us, forever." I looked at the fuel gauge, quarter tank. I looked at the temperature. The digital display had stopped working, but frost was creeping across the dashboard. I looked at Thomas, if that was even his real name, sitting there with his impossible stillness and his dead eyes. And I made a choice. I put the truck in gear and drove. The next hour was the longest of my life. Thomas sat silent beside me, growing more translucent as we pushed north. I could see through his hand to the armrest beneath. The figures on the road appeared and disappeared. Sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, always watching. The cold was excruciating, like needles in my lungs with every breath. When we finally reached the Pickle Lake turnoff, Thomas pointed to a narrow access road. "There, that's where it happened. The ice road." I turned onto it, following his directions down to where the road met a frozen lake. In my headlights, I could see the dark patch where the ice had broken through years ago, where Thomas had died. "Thank you," he said, and his voice sounded almost human now, almost sad. "You can go now." He opened the door and stepped out into the night. For a moment, I saw him clearly. Not as he'd looked in my cab, but as he must have looked when he died. Terrified, desperate, alone. Then he walked toward the broken ice and vanished. The cold lifted instantly. The heater roared back to life. The frost on the windshield melted away in seconds. I turned that truck around and drove back to Thunder Bay without stopping. I called in sick for the next 2 weeks. Eventually, I went back to work. Bills don't pay themselves. But I never took the Pickle Lake route again. Last month, a buddy of mine mentioned he'd picked up a hitchhiker on Highway 599. Said the guy was weird, didn't seem bothered by the cold, and asked a lot of strange questions. Asked if my buddy was heading north. I told him about Thomas, about the ice road and the broken patch on the lake. He laughed it off, said I'd been driving too long, that the isolation was getting to me. But 2 nights ago, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words, "Still driving north?" I checked the registry at the Thunder Bay Library, found an article from February 2020. A trucker named Thomas Whitmore had gone missing on Highway 599. Last seen heading to Pickle Lake. His truck was found 3 days later, broken through the ice on an access road. His body was never recovered. The thing is, I looked at the date of his disappearance. February 14th, 2020. Picked him up on February 14th, 2023. Exactly 3 years later. I'm writing this down because I need someone to know what's out there on those northern highways. If you're ever driving through northern Ontario in winter, and you see someone standing by the road, don't stop, no matter how much your conscience tells you to. Because some people aren't looking for help. They're looking for a way home, and they'll take you with them if you let them. I asked you a question. The voice was right next to my ear. I ran. Flashlight swinging wildly, I sprinted back toward where the lighthouse should be. My foot caught on something and I went down hard, my flashlight flying from my hand. I scrambled up, hands and knees scraping on stone and glass, and saw a shape in the fog ahead. The lighthouse. Thank God. I stumbled through the cottage door and slammed it shut behind me, pressing my back against it. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. Rational thoughts tried to push through the panic. Maybe it was another photographer. Maybe someone playing a prank. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Then I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling the building. And that voice again, but different now. Male. You shouldn't have come here. This is our place. We've been waiting so long. I grabbed my sleeping bag and equipment and ran for the lighthouse tower, slamming that door too. The spiral stairs felt safer somehow, more defensible. I climbed to the midpoint and sat there in the dark, my phone's dim screen providing the only light. The footsteps continued outside for hours. Sometimes one set, sometimes many overlapping, and the voices, men, women, children, all calling out, some asking for help, some angry, some just repeating names over and over. I pulled out the logbook again and read the last entry by my phone's light. October 30th, 1961. They want inside. Below it, in different handwriting, messier, more frantic, were lines I'd missed before they got in. Mary was wrong to leave. You can't outrun the fog. It follows. It remembers. Every ship that crashed on these rocks, every sailor who drowned, they're all still here, and now I'll join them. If you're reading this, leave. Leave before the fog comes, before they learn your voice, before they can call to you the way they called to me. Don't listen. Don't answer. Don't help. The last line was underlined 3 times. Whatever you do, don't stay until dawn. I looked at my phone. 11:47 p.m. Sunrise wasn't until around 6:30 a.m., almost 7 hours. The voices outside had changed. They weren't calling for help anymore. They were calling my name. Sarah. Sarah Chen. We know you're in there, Sarah. How did they know my name? Then I remembered. My car registration. My camera bag with my business cards. My credit card receipts from the gas station in the village. I'd left breadcrumbs. Or maybe they'd always known. Maybe the fog shows them things. I spent that night pressed against the cold stone wall of the lighthouse, listening to the voices outside shift and change. Sometimes they sounded like people I knew. My mother, my ex-boyfriend, my college roommate. Sometimes they were strangers. Sometimes they weren't human at all, just sounds shaped into words. Around 4 a.m., the fog started seeping into the lighthouse tower. I could see it curling through the broken windows above, drifting down the spiral stairs like water. I climbed higher, even though I knew the upper platform was dangerous. But the fog followed, always following. At 6:15 a.m., the first gray light of dawn appeared. The fog began to thin. The voices faded to whispers, then to nothing. By 6:30, when the sun finally broke over the horizon, everything was silent. I waited another hour before I moved. My body was stiff from cold and fear. Carefully, I descended the stairs and pushed open the lighthouse door. The morning was clear and bright. Birds were calling. The ocean sparkled blue and peaceful below the cliffs. My car was exactly where I'd left it, a 2-hour hike away. I packed my gear with shaking hands and started walking. I didn't look back at the lighthouse. I didn't take any more photos. I drove straight back to Halifax and spent the next week in my apartment, trying to convince myself it had been exhaustion, isolation, an overactive imagination fed by that logbook. Then I developed my photos. I'd taken dozens of shots inside the lighthouse tower before darkness fell. In every single one, standing in the background just at the edge of the frame, there are figures. Translucent, barely visible, but there. Men in old sailors' clothes, women in long dresses, children. And in the last photo I took, the one right after I found the logbook, there's a man standing on the stairs below me. He's holding the logbook open, pointing at it, his mouth open as if speaking, warning me. I've tried to find information about what happened to the last lighthouse keeper. Records show the station was decommissioned in 1962, but there's no mention of the keeper's name or what happened to him. It's like he was erased. Last week, I got a message from someone claiming to be a local historian. They said they'd seen my lighthouse photos online and wanted to know if I'd encountered anything unusual. They said 3 other photographers had visited the Widow's Watch in the past 20 years. All 3 mentioned hearing voices in the fog. 2 of them went back to the lighthouse. Neither returned. I blocked the historian's number. I deleted all my photos of that place except one, the image with the warning keeper. I keep it as a reminder. Some places are abandoned for a reason. Some places should stay forgotten. And I'll never photograph another lighthouse again. I asked you a question. The voice was right next to my ear. I ran. Flashlight swinging wildly, I sprinted back toward where the lighthouse should be. My foot caught on something and I went down hard, my flashlight flying from my hand. I scrambled up, hands and knees scraping on stone and glass, and saw a shape in the fog ahead. The lighthouse. Thank God. I stumbled through the cottage door and slammed it shut behind me, pressing my back against it. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. Rational thoughts tried to push through the panic. Maybe it was another photographer. Maybe someone playing a prank. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Then I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling the building. And that voice again, but different now. Male. You shouldn't have come here. This is our place. We've been waiting so long. I grabbed my sleeping bag and equipment and ran for the lighthouse tower, slamming that door too. The spiral stairs felt safer somehow, more defensible. I climbed to the midpoint and sat there in the dark, my phone's dim screen providing the only light. The footsteps continued outside for hours. Sometimes one set, sometimes many overlapping, and the voices, men, women, children, all calling out, some asking for help, some angry, some just repeating names over and over. I pulled out the logbook again and read the last entry by my phone's light. October 30th, 1961. They want inside. Below it, in different handwriting, messier, more frantic, were lines I'd missed before they got in. Mary was wrong to leave. You can't outrun the fog. It follows. It remembers. Every ship that crashed on these rocks, every sailor who drowned, they're all still here, and now I'll join them. If you're reading this, leave. Leave before the fog comes, before they learn your voice, before they can call to you the way they called to me. Don't listen. Don't answer. Don't help. The last line was underlined 3 times. Whatever you do, don't stay until dawn. I looked at my phone. 11:47 p.m. Sunrise wasn't until around 6:30 a.m., almost 7 hours. The voices outside had changed. They weren't calling for help anymore. They were calling my name. Sarah. Sarah Chen. We know you're in there, Sarah. How did they know my name? Then I remembered. My car registration. My camera bag with my business cards. My credit card receipts from the gas station in the village. I'd left breadcrumbs. Or maybe they'd always known. Maybe the fog shows them things. I spent that night pressed against the cold stone wall of the lighthouse, listening to the voices outside shift and change. Sometimes they sounded like people I knew. My mother, my ex-boyfriend, my college roommate. Sometimes they were strangers. Sometimes they weren't human at all, just sounds shaped into words. Around 4 a.m., the fog started seeping into the lighthouse tower. I could see it curling through the broken windows above, drifting down the spiral stairs like water. I climbed higher, even though I knew the upper platform was dangerous. But the fog followed, always following. At 6:15 a.m., the first gray light of dawn appeared. The fog began to thin. The voices faded to whispers, then to nothing. By 6:30, when the sun finally broke over the horizon, everything was silent. I waited another hour before I moved. My body was stiff from cold and fear. Carefully, I descended the stairs and pushed open the lighthouse door. The morning was clear and bright. Birds were calling. The ocean sparkled blue and peaceful below the cliffs. My car was exactly where I'd left it, a 2-hour hike away. I packed my gear with shaking hands and started walking. I didn't look back at the lighthouse. I didn't take any more photos. I drove straight back to Halifax and spent the next week in my apartment, trying to convince myself it had been exhaustion, isolation, an overactive imagination fed by that logbook. Then I developed my photos. I'd taken dozens of shots inside the lighthouse tower before darkness fell. In every single one, standing in the background just at the edge of the frame, there are figures. Translucent, barely visible, but there. Men in old sailors' clothes, women in long dresses, children. And in the last photo I took, the one right after I found the logbook, there's a man standing on the stairs below me. He's holding the logbook open, pointing at it, his mouth open as if speaking, warning me. I've tried to find information about what happened to the last lighthouse keeper. Records show the station was decommissioned in 1962, but there's no mention of the keeper's name or what happened to him. It's like he was erased. Last week, I got a message from someone claiming to be a local historian. They said they'd seen my lighthouse photos online and wanted to know if I'd encountered anything unusual. They said 3 other photographers had visited the Widow's Watch in the past 20 years. All 3 mentioned hearing voices in the fog. 2 of them went back to the lighthouse. Neither returned. I blocked the historian's number. I deleted all my photos of that place except one, the image with the warning keeper. I keep it as a reminder. Some places are abandoned for a reason. Some places should stay forgotten. And I'll never photograph another lighthouse again. I'm writing this from my apartment in Toronto, 3 weeks after it happened. The police have closed the case. They think we panicked, got disoriented, that Josh wandered off and we couldn't find him in the dark. They think I'm traumatized, that my memory is unreliable. But I know what I heard in those woods. And I know Josh didn't just wander off. It was supposed to be a simple camping trip. Me, my girlfriend Emma, and our friends Josh and Rebecca. We'd planned it for months, a long weekend in Algonquin Park, one of Ontario's most beautiful wilderness areas. We'd all been camping before. We knew what we were doing. We arrived at the park on Friday afternoon in early September. The leaves were just starting to turn, splashes of red and gold against the dark green pines. We registered at the visitor center, got our backcountry permit, and started the hike to our campsite on the northern shore of Lake Opiongo. The trail was well marked, about 8 kilometers in. We made good time, joking and talking, taking photos of the scenery. By 4 p.m. we'd reached our designated site, a small clearing surrounded by tall pines, with a rocky beach leading down to the lake. Perfect. We set up our 2 tents, gathered firewood, and cooked dinner as the sun set. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead. We sat around the fire drinking beer, playing cards, completely at peace. Around 11, we called it a night. Emma and I took one tent, Josh and Rebecca the other. I woke up around 2 a.m. needing to pee. The fire had died to embers, casting barely any light. I grabbed my flashlight and walked about 20 meters into the woods to relieve myself. That's when I noticed something odd. There was another campsite visible through the trees, maybe 50 meters away. I could see the dark shape of a tent and what looked like camping gear scattered around. That was weird. Our permit said we were the only ones assigned to this section of the lake. Sites were supposed to be spaced far enough apart for privacy. I finished up and walked back to our camp, making a mental note to mention it to the others in the morning. Maybe someone had the wrong coordinates. But in the morning, when I pointed it out to Josh, he looked confused. What campsite? We walked over together. The site was still there. A blue tent, still zipped shut, a camping stove, a cooler, 2 backpacks leaning against a tree. But something felt wrong about it. Everything was too neat, too arranged, and there was no one around. "Hello?" Josh called out. No answer. Emma and Rebecca joined us. We stood there looking at the abandoned camp, an uneasy feeling growing in my stomach. "Maybe they went for a morning hike," Emma suggested. "Without their gear?" Rebecca pointed at the backpacks. "Who goes hiking without water?" Josh unzipped the tent. Inside were 2 sleeping bags, both laid out neatly. A lantern, some clothes folded in the corner. "This is really weird," he said. "It looks like they just vanished." We checked for a note, some explanation. Nothing. We looked around the campsite for signs of struggle. Nothing. The camping stove was cold, hadn't been used recently. The cooler had food in it, still sealed. "We should report this," I said. "Something's not right." We hiked back to the visitor center, which took about 2 hours. The ranger on duty, an older guy named Martin, listened to our story with growing concern. He checked his logs. "No one else is registered for that section," he said. "You sure about what you saw?" "Positive," Josh said. "There's a whole camp set up there. Blue tent, cooler, the works." Martin radioed another ranger, and they agreed to hike out with us to check it out. By the time we got back to our campsite, it was early afternoon. The other camp was gone, not packed up. Gone. No tent, no gear, no sign that anyone had ever been there. Just empty forest. Martin searched the area carefully, looking for tent stakes, scuff marks, any evidence. He found nothing. He looked at us with barely concealed skepticism. "You kids been drinking?" "No," Emma said firmly. "We all saw it. This morning. Right here." Martin sighed. "Look, sometimes the woods play tricks on you. Shadows, fog, exhaustion. It's easy to think you saw something that wasn't there." We insisted. We described everything in detail. He took notes, said he'd file a report, but I could tell he didn't believe us. After he left, the 4 of us sat around our campfire, disturbed. "We all saw it, right?" Rebecca said quietly. "I'm not crazy." "We all saw it," Josh confirmed. That night, we stayed up later, feeding the fire, none of us wanting to admit we were scared. Around midnight, we finally retreated to our tents. Emma fell asleep quickly, but I lay awake, listening to the sounds of the forest. Around 2 a.m., the same time I'd woken up the night before, I heard something. Voices. They were distant, muffled, but definitely human voices. I sat up, careful not to wake Emma. The voices were coming from the direction where the abandoned camp had been. I unzipped the tent as quietly as I could and stepped outside. Josh was already standing there, flashlight in hand, staring into the woods. "You hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. We listened. The voices were clearer now. People talking, laughing. The sounds of a normal camping trip. But the words were strange. I couldn't quite make them out. Like listening to a conversation through a wall. "Should we check it out?" Josh asked. Every instinct said no, but curiosity won. We woke Emma and Rebecca, and together we walked toward the sounds. The abandoned campsite was back. The tent, the gear, everything. Exactly as we'd seen it that morning. But now there was a fire burning, and shadows moving around it. Figures. We got within 30 meters and stopped. The figures were people, 2 of them, sitting by the fire. We couldn't see their faces clearly, just silhouettes. They were talking. Their voices that same muffled quality, like an old radio with bad reception. "Hello?" Josh called out. The figures stopped talking. Silence. Then, slowly, they turned toward us. That's when I realized something was horribly wrong. They turned in perfect unison, like puppets on strings. And when they stood up, they moved wrong. Too smooth, too fluid, like they were gliding rather than walking. "Josh?" One of them called out. The voice was flat, emotionless. "Emma, Rebecca, Michael?" They knew our names. "How?" Emma started, but I grabbed her arm. "Run," I said. The figures started walking toward us. Not fast, but with that same wrong gliding movement. And as they got closer, I could see them more clearly in the firelight. They looked like us, not similar. Identical. Same clothes, same faces, same everything. We ran. We crashed through the forest, branches whipping our faces, roots trying to trip us. Behind us, I could hear them calling in our voices. "Wait, come back!" "It's us, we need help." We made it back to our campsite, gasping for air. "Pack," Josh said. "Pack everything. We're leaving, now." We threw our gear together in minutes, not caring about organization. We just needed to get out. The trail back to the parking lot was 8 kilometers, but we'd hike it in the dark. Anything was better than staying here. As we packed, I heard Emma gasp. "Guys," she was pointing at the tree line. Standing there, just visible in the light from our flashlights, were the figures. Still wearing our faces. Still staring. "Please don't go," one of them said in my voice. "We've been waiting so long. We need you to stay." "What are you?" Rebecca screamed. "We're you," it said simply. "We've always been you. Since you came here. Since you saw the camp. You're already part of the pattern now." "Let's go," Josh said, shouldering his pack. We started down the trail, half walking, half running. The figures followed, staying just at the edge of our flashlight beams. Always there, always watching, and now there were more of them. 4 became 8, became 12. Some looked like us. Others looked like strangers, all moving with that same wrong motion. "Wait," the voices called, overlapping, creating an awful chorus. "Wait, come back. Stay with us. You belong here now." We didn't stop. We hiked through the night, the figures following. Sometimes close, sometimes far, but always there. I kept hearing my own voice calling from the darkness, begging us to stop, to come back. Around 4 a.m., something changed. Josh, who was leading, suddenly stopped. "Guys," he said quietly, "which way is the trail?" We looked around. In our panic, in the darkness, we'd gotten turned around. The trail markers were gone. We were standing in unfamiliar forest surrounded by identical trees. "We'll find it," I said, trying to sound confident. "We just need to—" "Michael," Emma said, grabbing my arm. "Where's Josh?" I turned. Josh was gone. He'd been right there, literally right in front of us, and now he was just... gone. "Josh!" Rebecca screamed. "Josh!" From somewhere in the darkness, we heard his voice. "I'm here. I'm right here! Follow my voice!" We ran toward it, crashing through underbrush. The voice kept moving, always just ahead. "This way, come on!" We broke into a clearing and stopped. Standing in the center was Josh. But behind him was another Josh, and another. 3 Joshes, all identical, all staring at us. "Which one of you is real?" Emma whispered. They all smiled the same smile. "Does it matter?" they said in unison. Rebecca broke. She turned and ran, screaming. Emma and I followed. We ran until our lungs burned, until our legs gave out, until we saw the blessed sight of the parking lot in the gray dawn light. We made it to Emma's car and locked the doors. We sat there shaking, crying, waiting for full daylight. Josh never came back. The park rangers searched for 3 days. They found our campsite, our abandoned gear. They found no evidence of the missing camp we'd described. They found no trace of Josh. The official report says he got separated from the group and likely fell, hit his head, became disoriented. His body is probably out there somewhere, they said. The wilderness is vast. People disappear, but I know the truth. Josh is still in those woods, and so are the others who disappeared over the years. All of them, stuck in some loop, some pattern we stumbled into when we saw that abandoned camp. Yesterday, I got a text from Josh's number. Just 2 words, "Come back." I blocked it. But last night, I heard his voice outside my apartment window. I live on the 8th floor. "Michael," it called softly. "Why did you leave? We're waiting for you. We've always been waiting. I'm writing this down in case something happens to me. If you're planning to camp in Algonquin Park, especially near Lake Opeongo, and you see an abandoned campsite, don't investigate. Don't try to help. Don't acknowledge it, just leave. And whatever you do, don't let them learn your name." My name is David Tremblay, and I've lived in Montreal my entire life. I know this city like the back of my hand. Every street, every shortcut, every metro station. I've taken the last train home more times than I can count. But what happened 3 months ago has made me terrified of the underground. I work as a line cook at a restaurant in Old Montreal. Most nights I'm done by 11, but that Thursday we had a private event that ran late. By the time I cleaned my station and changed out of my work clothes, it was almost 1 in the morning. I'd missed my usual metro and had to catch the last train on the Orange Line. The Champ de Mars station was nearly empty when I descended the escalator. Just me, a security guard doing his rounds, and a homeless man sleeping on a bench near the entrance. The fluorescent lights gave everything a sickly yellow tinge. My footsteps echoed on the tile floor as I walked to the platform. I checked the digital display. Last train, 12:47 a.m. I had 3 minutes. The platform was deserted. Usually there are at least a few other late-night workers, students, bar staff heading home. But tonight, nobody. Just empty benches and the stale smell of underground air. I stood near the yellow safety line, scrolling through my phone, when I felt it. That pressure change in the air that comes before a train arrives. The rumble of wheels on tracks. I looked up. The train emerged from the tunnel, its lights cutting through the darkness. As it slowed to a stop, I noticed something odd. The cars were completely dark inside except for the standard safety lighting, and I couldn't see anyone through the windows. No passengers at all. The doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. I stepped into the nearest car. It was freezing inside. Montreal metros are usually warm, especially in October, but this felt like stepping into a refrigerator. My breath fogged in front of my face. I looked around the car. Empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of the usual litter too. No forgotten newspapers, no coffee cups, no advertisements hanging from the straps. Just bare metal poles and worn seats. The doors closed. The train lurched forward. I sat down near the middle of the car, pulling my jacket tighter. The cold was getting worse. I could hear the familiar rhythm of the metro, the clacking of wheels, the slight squeal as we took curves. But something was off. The sound was muffled, distant, like I was hearing it through water. At Yukon, the next stop, the train slowed. I watched the platform slide past the windows. Empty. The doors opened. Nobody got on. The doors closed. We moved again. That's when I realized I couldn't see the station name signs anymore. The windows showed only darkness punctuated by the occasional service light. We should have been approaching Sherbrooke Station, but there was nothing outside, just black tunnel. I pulled out my phone to check the metro map. No signal, which was normal underground. But my phone's clock was acting strange. The numbers were flickering, jumping between different times. 12:51, 1:34, 11:47, 2:03. A sound made me look up. Footsteps, someone walking between cars. The door at the far end of the car opened, and a figure stepped through. A man in a gray business suit carrying a briefcase. He walked with a strange, stiff gait and sat down at the opposite end of the car, facing away from me. I felt relief. I wasn't alone. Crazy cold in here, right? I called out in French. He didn't respond. Didn't turn around. Just sat there, perfectly still. Maybe he had headphones in. Maybe he didn't want to be bothered. I went back to looking at my phone, trying to ignore the gnawing unease in my stomach. The train should have reached Sherbrooke by now. Then Montreal. Then Laurier. But we just kept moving through darkness. The rhythm of the wheels never changing. No stops, no stations. I stood up and walked to the window, pressing my face against the glass. Nothing. Complete darkness. Not even the emergency lights you usually see in the tunnels. It was like we were moving through a void. Behind me, I heard the door open again. More footsteps. I turned. Another passenger had entered. A woman this time, wearing a long coat, her face obscured by her hair. She sat down a few rows behind the man. Same stiff posture. Same absolute stillness. "Excuse me," I said, louder this time. "Do you know what's going on? We should have stopped by now." Neither of them moved. Neither acknowledged me. The door opened again. A teenage boy. Then an elderly woman. Then a middle-aged man in a security uniform. One after another, passengers filed into the car, each taking a seat, each sitting in that same unnaturally still way, never making a sound except for footsteps. Within 5 minutes, the car was half full, and every single one of them had their back to me. My heart was pounding. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. Where were they coming from? The train hadn't stopped. There was no other car they could have walked through. I walked toward the rear door, planning to move to another car, to find someone normal. Someone who could tell me what was happening. But as I got closer to the seated passengers, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. They weren't breathing. None of them. Their chests weren't moving. And now that I was closer, I could see their skin had a grayish tint, like old meat. I backed away slowly, my hand fumbling for the emergency intercom button. I found it and pressed. "Hello? Is anyone there? Something's wrong. I need..." Static. Then a voice, barely audible through the interference. "Identify yourself." "My name is David Tremblay. I'm on the last train, Orange Line, heading toward Côte Vertu. Something's very wrong. The train won't stop and there are..." The lights in the car flickered. Once. Twice. When they came back on, all the passengers were facing me. I saw their faces clearly for the first time. Some were rotted, skin hanging loose. Others were burned. One had no face at all, just a smooth blank surface where features should have been. But all of them were staring at me with empty eyes. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. One of them stood up. The man in the business suit. He took a step toward me. His mouth opened and I could see there was nothing inside. No tongue, no teeth, just darkness. "Wrong train," he said in a voice like grinding metal. "You took the wrong train." "What are you talking about?" "This is the Orange Line. I take it every..." "This train doesn't go to your station," the woman said, standing now. Her voice was the same, broken, wrong. "This train goes somewhere else." They all stood up. 10, 15, 20 figures, all moving toward me with that same jerking puppet-like motion. I ran to the forward door and yanked it open, stumbling into the next car. It was full of them too. Dozens of figures, all turning to look at me as I entered. I ran through into the next car. More. Always more. I was 4 cars deep when I saw him, sitting in the middle of the car, facing forward like all the others. But this one I recognized. It was me. Same jacket, same work pants, same shoes. My own face, gray and lifeless, staring straight ahead. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Couldn't process what I was seeing. My doppelganger slowly turned its head toward me. When it spoke, it used my voice. "You're late, David. You were supposed to be here 3 months ago. The accident. Remember? Accident." The word triggered something. A memory, fuzzy and distant. Coming home late. Being tired. Standing too close to the platform edge. Someone bumping into me. The feeling of falling. The train lights coming. "No," I said. "No, that didn't happen. I'm alive. I'm here. Are you?" It stood up, and all the others stood with it. "Look at your hands, David." I looked down. My hands were gray. My breath wasn't fogging anymore because I wasn't breathing. The cold I felt wasn't from the air. It was from inside me. "The last train," my double said, walking closer. "It picks up everyone who dies in the metro. Everyone who never made it home. We've been waiting for you. You've been running for 3 months, but you always end up here." On the last train, the lights flickered again. Through the windows, I could finally see something other than darkness. A platform. We were pulling into a station, but it wasn't any station I recognized. The signs were in a language I couldn't read. Symbols that hurt to look at. The platform was crowded with figures, all waiting, all gray and still like the passengers around me. "Last stop," my double said. "Everyone off." The doors opened. The passengers began filing out, and I felt my body moving too, following them without my permission. I tried to fight it, Tried to turn back, but my legs kept walking. As I stepped onto the platform, I looked back at the train. In the window, I saw him. A living passenger, face pressed against the glass, eyes wide with terror. He looked exactly like me, but younger somehow, more alive. He was screaming something I couldn't hear through the glass. The doors closed. The train pulled away, and he was gone. I don't know how long I've been here. Time doesn't work the same way. Sometimes I'm standing on this platform. Sometimes I'm on the train. Sometimes I'm back in Champ de Mars, watching other passengers board, trying to warn them. But they never see me. Last week, I saw someone I recognized, a coworker from the restaurant. He looked confused, scared. He doesn't know yet. None of them do. Not until they see themselves already aboard. If you're reading this, if somehow this message reaches the surface, please be careful on the metro. Stand back from the platform edge. Don't take the last train if you can help it. And if you ever board an empty car, if you feel that terrible cold, if passengers start appearing from nowhere, get off at the next stop, no matter what, even if it means walking the rest of the way home. Because the last train doesn't always take you where you think you're going. Sometimes it takes you where you've already been. My name is Dr. Rachel Kwan, and I'm a wildlife biologist specializing in Arctic fox populations. I've spent winters in remote research stations across Canada, from Nunavut to the Northwest Territories. I'm not easily spooked. I've dealt with polar bears, been stranded in blizzards, spent months in complete isolation. But what happened in the Yukon last December has made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about being alone in the wilderness. The research cabin was located about 80 kilometers north of Dawson City, accessible only by snowmobile or helicopter. It was a small structure, basically one main room with a wood stove, a cot, a desk, and some storage. Solar panels and a backup generator for power. A satellite phone for emergencies. Everything I needed for a 6-week solo observation period during the polar night. I arrived on December 3rd, when the sun had already stopped rising above the horizon. Up here, winter means 24 hours of darkness from late November through mid-January. Most people can't handle it. The isolation, the endless dark, the cold. But I'd done this before. I actually preferred it. No distractions, just my work and the quiet. The first week was routine. I'd snowshoe out to my observation points, set up camera traps, record data on fox dens and movement patterns. Back at the cabin by what would have been evening, I'd eat dinner, analyze my data, read, sleep. The darkness didn't bother me. I had my headlamp, the cabin lights, and the occasional shimmer of northern lights to break up the black. On the 8th night, I heard the first knock. I was sitting at my desk, typing up field notes, when it came. 3 distinct knocks on the cabin wall. Tap, 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 evenly spaced, deliberate. I looked up, listening. Nothing. Probably a branch, I thought, or ice falling from the roof. I went back to my work. 5 minutes later, tap, 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 same wall, same rhythm. I got up and checked outside with my spotlight. Nothing. Just snow and darkness and the dark shapes of spruce trees. The temperature was minus 37 Celsius. Nothing should be moving out there. I convinced myself it was the cabin settling in the cold. Old wood contracting. Perfectly normal. The knocking came again the next night. Same time, around what would have been 9 p.m. 3 knocks, same wall. I tried to ignore it, but after it happened 4 times in an hour, I grabbed my spotlight and went outside to investigate. The beam of light swept across the snow around the cabin. No tracks, no animal signs. Nothing. The snow was undisturbed except for my own paths to and from the observation sites. On the 3rd night, the pattern changed. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 more knocks from a different wall, then another wall. The knocking was moving around the cabin in a circle. I stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, tracking the sound as it circled. Whatever was making it was moving around the entire perimeter of the cabin. In minus 40 weather, leaving no tracks. Hello? I called out. My voice sounded small and stupid. Is someone there? The knocking stopped. Complete silence. Then after about 30 seconds, it came from directly above me. 3 knocks on the roof. My heart was pounding. I grabbed the satellite phone and almost called for pickup right then. But what would I say? That I heard knocking? They'd think I was losing it, getting cabin fever after barely a week. I decided to document it instead. I set up my audio recorder and left it running all night. The knocking continued. Always 3 knocks. Always moving. Sometimes on the walls, sometimes on the roof. Once even seeming to come from under the floor. I didn't sleep. I sat on my cot with a hunting knife in my hand, watching the walls, listening. Around 4 a.m. something new happened. A voice. Muffled, distant, but definitely a voice. Calling my name. Rachel! Rachel! I froze. Nobody out here knew my name except... No, that wasn't possible. The nearest person was 80 kilometers away. Rachel, let me in. It's so cold. The voice was coming from right outside the door. I stared at it, watching the handle, expecting it to turn, but it didn't move. The voice just kept calling, getting more urgent, more desperate. Please! I'm freezing. Rachel, please. Just open the door. Every instinct screamed at me not to. I pressed my back against the far wall and waited. The voice continued for about 10 minutes, then faded away. The knocking resumed. In the morning, or what passed for morning in the permanent darkness, I checked outside again. Still no tracks. The snow around the door was completely undisturbed. I listened to the audio recording. My voice asking if someone was there. Silence. Then my own voice again. Rachel, let me in. It's so cold. The voice asking to be let in was mine. My exact voice, my inflection, everything. But I hadn't said those words. I called the research coordinator on the satellite phone. Tried to explain what was happening without sounding crazy. He suggested I might be experiencing auditory hallucinations due to isolation and the darkness. Told me to take vitamin D supplements, get more sleep. Maybe come back early if I wasn't comfortable. But I could hear it in his voice. He thought I was cracking, and maybe I was. Maybe none of this was real. That night, I didn't hear knocking. Instead, I heard footsteps on the roof. Back and forth, like someone pacing. Heavy footsteps that made the wooden beams creak, then the voice again. But this time, it wasn't mine. It was my mother's voice. My mother, who'd been dead for 3 years. Rachel, honey, why won't you let me in? I've been out here so long. I'm so cold. Please, baby, just open the door. I put my hands over my ears and screamed at it to stop. The voice changed. My ex-boyfriend, my thesis advisor, my childhood friend. One after another, voices of people from my life, all begging to be let in, all claiming to be freezing, all perfectly mimicked. This went on for hours. I huddled on my cot, knife in hand, crying, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. Around 2 a.m., everything went quiet. The footsteps stopped. The voices stopped. Even the wind outside seemed to die down. Then I heard scratching, soft at first, then growing louder. Something was scratching at the door, not random scratching, deliberate, like someone trying to dig through the wood with their fingernails. I watched as thin scratches began appearing on the inside of the door. Long parallel lines like claw marks appearing from nothing. The wood was being scored from the inside, even though nothing was there. That's when I noticed the temperature. The cabin was getting colder. My breath was fogging despite the wood stove burning. Frost was forming on the windows, on the walls, spreading in crystalline patterns. The scratching grew more frantic. The door was rattling now, shaking in its frame, even though I could see nothing touching it. Then a new sound, whispering. Dozens of voices all whispering at once, overlapping, creating a horrible susurrus that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I couldn't make out individual words, just the constant hiss of voices, getting louder and louder. Something pressed against the wall next to me. I watched as the wood bowed inward, as if something large was pushing against it from outside. Then another wall, then another. The entire cabin was being pressed from all sides, the walls creaking and groaning. "What do you want?" I screamed. "What the hell do you want?" The whispers stopped. One voice spoke, clear and close, right next to my ear even though nothing was there. "We want to know what it's like," it said. "To be warm, to be alive. We've forgotten. Who are you? We're the ones who didn't make it. The ones who froze. The ones who starved. The ones who went mad in the darkness and walked out into the snow. We've been here so long, Rachel, wandering, waiting. And now you're here, alone, in our darkness." The pressure on the walls increased. The wood was splintering now. One of the windows cracked with a sound like a gunshot. "We can't come in," the voice continued. "Not unless you let us, but we can wait. We're very patient, and you'll have to leave eventually. The door will open, and we'll be there. I'll call for pickup. I'll leave tomorrow, will you?" The voice sounded amused. "You'll walk out to your radio cache to call for the helicopter. Half a kilometer through the darkness, through the trees, through the deep snow. You'll never make it. The moment you step outside, we'll be with you. In the dark, where you can't see. And Rachel, there are so many of us." I spent the rest of that night barricading myself in the cabin, pushed the desk against the door, piled supplies against the walls. The sounds continued, knocking, scratching, voices, footsteps, but nothing got in. At dawn, or what should have been dawn but was still pitch black, I made my decision. I packed only essentials: the satellite phone, emergency flares, my GPS, a thermos of hot coffee. I'd have to make it to the radio cache to call for emergency extraction. Half a kilometer, 12 minutes on snowshoes in good conditions. I stood at the door for a long time, hand on the handle, knowing that opening it was possibly the last thing I'd ever do. When I finally opened it, the darkness outside seemed to surge forward, thick and alive. My headlamp cut through it, showing only snow and trees. Nothing moving. Nothing there. I stepped out and started walking. I heard them immediately. Footsteps in the snow all around me, matching my pace. Heavy breathing that wasn't my own. Whispers in the darkness just beyond my light. I walked faster. The footsteps got closer. I could feel them right behind me, beside me, in front of me. The temperature was dropping impossibly lower. My lungs burned with each breath. "Rachel," they whispered. "Stop. Rest. It's so much easier if you just stop." I didn't stop. I ran. My snowshoes tangled and I fell, face first into the snow. When I looked up, I saw them. Figures standing in the darkness. Dozens of them. Gray, translucent, their faces hollow and hungry. Some were dressed in old-fashioned cold weather gear, others in modern clothes. Some looked like they'd been frozen solid, their skin black with frostbite. Others had no faces at all, just smooth expanses of ice. They moved closer, slowly, like they had all the time in the world. I struggled to my feet and kept going. The radio cache was close now. I could see it, a small metal box mounted on a post. The figures didn't follow beyond a certain point. They stopped at the edge of my light, watching as I reached the cache and made the call. "This is Dr. Rachel Kwan at Research Station 7. Emergency extraction requested. Immediate. Please confirm." Static. Then, "Dr. Kwan, this is base. Confirm emergency status? Confirmed. I need pickup now. As soon as possible. Roger that. Helicopter will arrive at 0800. Can you hold position?" I looked back at the cabin. The figures were standing around it now. Dozens of them. Maybe more. All facing outward. Waiting. Negative. "I'm staying at the cache. Do not ask me to return to the cabin." There was a pause. "Understood. Stay on the line. Help is coming." I huddled next to the radio cache for the next 4 hours, my headlamp battery dying, watching the figures watch me. They never came closer. Never spoke again. Just waited in the darkness. The helicopter arrived as the first gray hints of twilight touched the horizon. The pilot looked concerned when he saw me. I must have looked half frozen, definitely traumatized. "Are you hurt?" he asked as I climbed aboard. "No, just get me out of here." As we lifted off, I looked down at the cabin. The figures were gone, just a small structure in an ocean of snow and darkness. The pilot told me later that they found strange marks on the cabin walls. Deep scratches both inside and out. Patterns in the snow that didn't match any known animal. The audio equipment I'd left behind had recorded hours of sounds, but when they analyzed it, it was just static interspersed with what sounded like voices speaking in no known language. They shut down the research station. Said the isolation protocols needed review, but I know the real reason. Some places aren't meant for the living, especially not during the long darkness, when the boundary between the dead and the living grows thin. I still do wildlife research, but never alone, never in winter, and never ever in a place where the sun doesn't rise. Because I learned something in that cabin. In the Arctic darkness, we're not alone. We're never alone. The cold and the dark are full of things that used to be human, that remember what warmth felt like, what life felt like, and they want it back.